Hey guys, and welcome back to Thelearningdroid. Today on Thelearningdroid we're going to be having a look at painting. Actually it's watercolouring or water inking a piece of pyrography. This is the piece of pyrography. We've got a butterfly on that side and a butterfly on that side. It's been steam bent so that it stands up by itself, like so, as a little desk ornament thing. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to sand it slightly. Then we're going to use water ink pens, water-based ink pens, small brush, little glass for water, little glass for marking. So basically you put the marker on there, add water. The reason we're not putting the marker directly on the wood is because doesn't look very good. The reason we're not using paint is simply because it's more expensive. All you need, 2 glass dishes, brush, water-based markers, not alcohol-based or other kind of markers, because they can damage, or they can sort of open up the pores and run more. Kitchen towel to clean the brush, bit of water. The pyrography piece, you also need a scrap bit of wood, and of course we're going to sand this first because, as you can see, it's got quite a rough surface at the moment. So let's start off with the sanding. Sorry about that. So first things first, sanding paper. We only need a very fine grit because it's all sort of in rather good condition otherwise. Just need a very fine grit. This is 600 grit paper, and so we're just going to take off a slightly rough surface. Although this sanding block probably isn't the best because it's very square. In fact, if I take that off the sanding block and just use my hand to mimic the curve, it's also part of the steaming process. Just open up the pores. That's a much better surface on that side, and we're going to do the same on the other side. You can steam bend things after you've burnt them, which is what I did here. It does slightly soften the pyrography, because of course you've essentially wetted the burn, and as I'm sure you know, if you wet something like charcoal or something like that, it will run. So you can soften the burn slightly. That's okay. As long as it's not finely detailed shading, then something like that won't matter too much. So we've just sanded that off, nice and tidy. Next thing we're going to do, if I just move my chair in, no, 1 second, I need a scrap bit of wood. Always have a scrap bit of wood when you're doing something like this, so that you can test colours. Okay. Scrap bit of wood for testing colours, our pens, our brush, and a little bit of water. Literally, that's all you need, because we're only going to be using a few drops. I'm going to make sure this is all in frame so that you can see. So, I'm going to start with the butterfly on the outside here. And we're going to start with dark orange, I think. Now these colours change dramatically when you do this, compared with what they look like on paper, or if you just use the ink straight off. So you want a goodly amount of ink, although in truth the amount of ink you use is pathetically small, so the pens will last for ages. So a bit of water. We don't put it straight into the ink because we don't want to colour our water too much. So we start off by putting it around the edge, because you can see I keep going back. If I put it straight into the ink, then I'd be transferring colours back and forth. I just end up with dirty water quicker. This is just a way of delaying how long the water takes to dirty. So we've got our water there, and we're just going to mix in the inks. And it can be a case, you can just put 1 drop of water, mix in a tiny bit of ink on the edge. But I like to mix up a batch, because then I can have a one steady stable colour. We wipe off a bit of the excess and then have a look at the colour that we're getting. We're getting a pinky red from that. That's okay. So what my plan is I'm going to start up on the upper edges of his wing. Pyrography is actually very good with this because it will help to stop it running as much into the, or stop it tracking as much into the fibres of the wood. As with any painting, just carefully brush it in to where we want it to be. Now it will sit slightly on the surface of the pyrography, so you have to be slightly careful about where you're running your brush. I've already made a slight mistake. That's okay. This is a piece, is another gift piece. I do an awful lot of gift pieces because I'm not really selling anything or doing anything like that. I just do them as gifts. This one's for one of my friends who happens to like butterflies. So I thought, why not? Butterfly for you. Now, because the ink's sitting slightly here, or the water's sitting slightly here, I'm actually going to dab slightly to help absorb it, the excess. So I don't want it sitting too heavily and then tracking. So and what we do is just take the kitchen towel and just remove all the ink. I actually put far too much on there. Shows my sense, doesn't it? Now what we're going to do is we're going to go for a more yellow colour. It looks orange, but again these things change colour. Slightly less pinky orange. Yeah. And then I'll show you the other method. Take a little bit of water and then do a little bit of ink. Now the problem with this is the amount of ink you get in your water varies each time you go back. Ooh, that's a nice orange. I like that. And because you have to keep going back and redoing bits so that you've got enough ink, the density of the colour can vary. Oh, this is a very bright one. You'll have to bear this in mind. I like this one. Nice bright ink. And if you make a few mistakes, guys, you make a few mistakes. It is one of the difficulties of, if you make a mistake you want to correct it, but unfortunately the only real way to correct this is to sand it off and start again. I mean, if you put too much ink somewhere, you can always just add pure water to the wood and then dab with the kitchen towel. So if you've added too much colour somewhere, you can always slightly thin out the colour using the kitchen towel and a little bit of water. But it's not ideal. Ideally you'd want to just have your colours set. So a little bit of water to clean off my brush. Now remember, these are all water-based inks, so some people say you can use some people do use watercolour pencils, artists' pencils. Other people use watercolour pens, people use watercolour paints, water-based wood dyes. A whole array of stuff you can use, depending on sort of what you want to do. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this yellow up here, slightly out of the way. Once again, nice little bit of ink. It's very hard to see on the glass because it's quite a bright colour. But I'm just going to add a little bit of water to here and then mix it in. I'm going to use this orange again later, so I'm going to leave it on there. Don't be worried if the colour where you first put the brush seems a little bit dark. As it spreads into the wood, as you work the brush over it, it'll thin out slightly. And bright colours can be quite nice. I know some people just use acrylic paints and things. Personally, it's not for me. I've seen some very nicely done ones, but personally I think the acrylic paint takes away from the pyrography. It seems very not bold, but seems very it almost washes out the burn. It almost washes out where you've actually burnt, and I don't like that. I much prefer where you can see very much where the burn lines are, very much where the burn usage is. It's a personal taste thing. I mean, if someone asked me to do a pyrography for them and asked me to paint it with acrylic paint, fine. Or paint it so that the burn lines were barely visible. That's pyrography they've asked me to do, that's their choice. I'll do it, but as I said, at the moment I'm just doing bits and pieces for friends, so I tend to get given carte blanche to do what I want. Sorry if I'm not talking as much as I normally do, guys. I'm a little bit down at the moment, having a few health issues. But anyway, as I was saying, if you have too much ink, like I've had a bit too much ink on there, just use a piece of kitchen towel and take it off, and you see it's automatic. It's instantly lightened the colour. It's instantly made the colour bright, slightly less vibrant, which means I can brush over with a slightly softer or slightly lesser amount of ink and get an even colour. It's a quite nice thing to do. I quite enjoy it. It's quite pleasant. Depending on the kind of wood, this one's on basswood, so it's quite fine grained. It does run slightly if you go over the edge, or if you put too much liquid on, it will run up and down the grain slightly on basswood. OB sheet's horrible for running up and down the grain. It will track the grain tremendously if you put a tiny bit too much ink on. It'll just go running up and down the grain, which is one of the risks of having different kinds of wood. Let's again clean the brush. Now I'm going to try something a little bit more fancy here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more of this yellow up here just above where the water is, because you don't want to put the felt tip on the water because you're going to have issues with the felt tip running and things. I'm going to put a little bit more orange here, and then on the other side I'm going to have the red that comes out pink, but that's okay. I'm going to have a lot of it, see if we can get it a bit more reddish. Might actually add a little bit of a darker red to see if I can't make it a little bit more of a red colour. Certain inks come out weird. The brown inks that I've got came out looking very pink. I'm going to track this colour all the way down. And basically this bright yellow going to be for all these little dots at the bottom. Try not to rush, guys. I'm rushing slightly because, well, I've got slightly shaky hands. That's what I'm slightly down about, medical issues, so it means my hands are a little bit shaky. I'm sorry I haven't been doing many videos. My camera's been misbehaving. I was just checking there to make sure it was still recording. My camera's been misbehaving, so it's been making video making a little bit difficult. So now we're going to get a little bit fancy. We add these two inks together, and then we add a lot of extra water in. Even more water. That was a little bit too thick. Even more water. You really want to thin this ink out. Ah, there we go. Now we're going to brush this right across both bottom wings. Nice soft orange. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add extra ink to this. So we're going to actually add the rest of the orange ink to it to thicken it up and make it more orange. And that's going to get brushed in across the top, along here, like so. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the red and the orange ink and merge them slightly to give us a kind of darker red-orange. It's going to be our next up element, and we're going to work them together slightly so that they slightly overlap. What I'm looking for is almost a gradient of colour. Then what we're going to do is we're going to be almost purely red, and that gives us a nice dark orangey red, which we're going to work next up on our colour scheme. And especially with organic creatures, don't be worried if your colours don't quite line up on both sides. It's nice if they are even, but then we're going to use our even darker red, and that's going to come in all the way up. So we've got this nice gradient, and one of the reasons that I'm just giving these away to my friends, guys, is I'm practicing a lot with them, and I don't want to be sort of charging people for practice pieces or... Oops, I very nearly made a critical mistake there, guys. I very nearly put a brush with red ink into the orange ink and then brushed down here, which would have been a bit of a mistake. Excellent, guys. So that's our wings coloured, and as you can see we've got quite bright, vibrant colours. That was one of the things this woman said, my friend. She said that she very much likes bright colours. She very much likes a more cartoony look than a very, very natural look. So I've gone for a more cartoony look. Now, browns tend to come out a bit pinky. But what we're going to do is we're going to do two browns side by side. And then to stop them coming out pinky, make them come out brown. We're just going to have a little bit of black up here. And this is why we have our tester piece of wood, guys, so that we can test our colours and make sure they come out right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by mixing the two browns, and we're going to make it a very ink heavy mix because we don't want it to be red. And that's it, guys. The more ink heavy it is, that's actually not a bad brown there. I'm going to add a tiny bit of the black, so I'm just going to trail a tiny bit of the black down and add it in. Oh yeah, there we go. And you can see, guys, I don't know if you can see, but that one's got a slightly red tint to it, whereas that one goes properly brown. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a bit more water, thin it up, make it a little bit more a little bit lighter, and then we're just going to brush over lightly this section, just to give it a little bit of colour, because it's very odd to have it standing out without colour. I mean, if you wanted to, you could colour the whole background. You could do a sky background or do a flower painting or something. I mean, you could just paint like this without the pyrography if you wanted to, although the pyrography, as I said, gives borders to the ink and stops it running. So that's one side, guys, done, and it's been done as a kind of instruction video showing you how to do it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn over, do the other side, and I'm going to switch it into a bit of a vlog. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the video up, and we're going to have a different video. So see you again in a couple of minutes.